When it comes to marriage, results definitely may vary, and we know it by looking at the couples around us. You look at couples around you, and some are happy, some are not. Some always seem to be fighting, some never seem to be talking. Some are always together, some you never see together. You're not even sure they're a couple anymore. Bottom line, when it comes to marriage, results may vary. Marriages don't break up because most of those stresses. Marriages don't break up because of in-laws. Marriages don't break up because of money. Marriages don't break up because of sex. Marriages fall apart, bottom line, because of unfulfilled expectations. The expectations that you and I bring into a relationship is either going to make or break that relationship. It's going to make or break the marriage. We think if I can find Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, then everything is going to fall into place and then we'll somehow live happily ever after. But according to the parents, the belief that if you just find the right person, then you'll experience happily ever after in your marriage, they say it's one of the most widely held and most destructive marriage myths of all. And they say, you know what? This idea of living happily ever after when you find Mr. or Mrs. Right, they said that's just the tip of the iceberg for the myths about marriage. Research actually suggests that difficult marriages are plagued by this vast assortment of misconceptions, vast assortment of myths. And so today I actually want to address the top 4 marriage myths that are there. 4 of the most harmful, probably 4 of the most common myths about marriage. Myth number 1 is that we expect exactly the same thing from marriage. You and your spouse. The two of you expect exactly the same thing from your marriage. Somehow we have this idea that saying I do we're just gonna lock arms together. We're gonna think the same, be the same from now on, but it brings with it a host of unconscious expectations. It brings with us expectations that aren't always fulfilled, and so we find ourselves frustrated and irritated at what's going on. One of the ways that we have these mismatched expectations come through what you might call unspoken rules. Unspoken rules are just that. They're not talked about. Rarely do you ever speak about these rules, but you know what they are in the back of your head. And you've just never talked about your list of unspoken rules to your spouse, at least not until they broke some of the rules. Then all of a sudden you talk about them, and so you become frustrated because she's not following the rules that you have in your head. But how could she? You've never talked about them. You've never told her what the rules are before, and you're irritated that her rules are different than yours. But again, you've never verbalized these to each other, and so you get frustrated in your relationship because neither of you are living by your unspoken rules. And we have these unconscious roles that we also have in our relationships. Unconscious roles that we've developed from our backgrounds, from the time we were kids. We began to think into, this is what a husband does, this is what a wife does, this is the role that I'm going to play, this is the role that she's going to play, and it's almost like they're involuntary, where it just happens, and we get married, and it's like we become actors in a movie, and without knowing it, we're drawn into acting out these roles in our marriage. And myth number 2 says everything good in our relationship will only get better. It's only going to go up and up and up. It's wonderful. And the things that are good, I don't really have to work on because it's just going to get better. And the truth is, not everything does get better. Sometimes they get worse. Some things improve over time, but some things become more and more difficult. One of the things that most likely will not get better initially in your relationship is the image that you portray for your spouse. The image that you have. See, you married an idealized image of your spouse. And the idea that you have of your spouse, we've kind of airbrushed this picture, this mental picture of who the other person really is, but eventually reality sets in, and eventually reality is very different than the airbrushed image that we've created in our minds. And again, it happens to all of us. And with that image, we always see our mate at their very best. And in our romantic fantasies, we see him as more noble, more attractive, more intelligent, more gifted than he really is. But this fantasy doesn't last long, because at some point we marry this image, and all of a sudden we realize, image is different than the real person, and there's this disconnect. Everything bad in my life when I get married will disappear. All the struggles that I have, they'll be gone. Before marriage, This is what's fascinating. Before marriage, we don't expect life to be sunshine and roses all the time, but somehow, for some reason, once we get married, we do expect life to be sunshine and roses all the time. And why is that? Why would we expect different from before till after we're married? Unfortunately, getting married does not cure all ills. And the bad traits and the bad habits and the bad feelings that you carried around with you before you were married, when you left the wedding hall in whatever fancy car you drove away in, all of those bad feelings and bad thoughts and bad things were with you as well. You carry them with you into the wedding, beyond the wedding and into the marriage. Why do you expect that somehow in marriage everything is going to be better, everything is going to be nice, all of the bad is going to be gone from your life? Why do you think somehow it's going to be different? Marriage is not a cure-all for all of our problems. It will not make everything bad disappear. But with time, with work, it can become an agent for healing, for restoration. But understand, the wedding itself, when you talk about the wedding, it's not a place of arrival, it's just where the adventure begins. You're just getting started. Myth number 4, my spouse will make me whole. When I get married, I will finally be complete. There's this old saying that you've heard, opposites attract. And the idea of opposites attracting is the idea that you take two very different people, they're drawn together because somehow they're going to complement each other. And you take his weaknesses and you mix them with her strengths, and all of a sudden they're made complete. And this myth usually begins with the belief that somehow this couple, they were meant to be. You've heard people say, oh, that couple, they were meant to be. They were made for each other is what we'll talk about. And the problem with this view is that when difficulties arise, if they were meant to be when everything was going well, then when things begin to go badly, we can quickly jump to the other side of the equation and we can make the assumption that, oh, you know what? I think I've made a mistake. I think I just married the wrong person. I wasn't meant to be with her after all. And if only I'd have chosen Mr. Right, if only I'd have chosen Mrs. Right, everything would have worked out. And John Fisher says if you're going to be successful in your marriage, he says this. He said, it doesn't come from finding the right person. So don't think that it's just about finding Mr. Right. It's important to spend time looking, but it's the ability of both partners to adjust to the real person that they inevitably realize they've married. Myth number 5, it would be easier to start over with someone new. And you're kind of thinking and saying, you know what, it would be easier if I would just start with somebody new. But can I just say to you, it won't be. Because you have issues and you have baggage that you're carrying with you right now. And simply picking up and finding a new partner does not take away all those issues, does not take away that baggage. It's not going to make the next relationship any easier. As a matter of fact, you're going to pick up all of your baggage and all of your things, and you're going to add to it, and you're going to take it into a new relationship, and they're going to add their baggage, their situation, and you're not walking away with something easier. Instead, you're walking into something with a whole new set of issues that the other person and you are bringing in to this new relationship. And I understand some of you right now, you're thinking your marriage is not going to make it. And some of you, you've already made the decision to walk away. You're just waiting for the right time to do it. With proper expectations, you can begin to experience glimpses, moments of what life could be like in your marriage. And that's my prayer for you this week, that this week you would begin with proper expectations when you get rid of the myths that are there in your marriage, but instead you begin to have proper expectations and you begin to talk about those expectations. Talk about the unspoken rules that you have in your life. Talk about the unconscious roles that you've fallen into in your relationship. You've never talked about them before. You've griped about them before. You've nagged at the other person because they've broken those rules. But have you ever sat down and said, let me just tell you what's in my head. It may not be right, but this is what and this is why I feel like I do. And just begin to have conversation with proper expectations. We can begin to have glimpses, just moments. It's not going to be 24 hours a day for the next 7 days, but glimpses are moments where you begin to realize, you step back and you go, oh man, she is the right one for me. Because of the work that you're putting into it, because of the expectations you have, because God is working in your life and he's beginning to change things in your life and he's giving you the energy to think wisely in your relationship.